Think or Be Eaten, and with us is, I always say with us, I'm the only person here, but anyway, with us is John Bonanno. Been on before. This time we're going to talk about the 1988 film, They Live, based on a short story by Ray Nelson entitled 8 o'clock in the morning. Before we do that, though, I want to read this to you because I got this from Charles Wilcox. It was waiting for me this Sunday morning, and it probably has something to do with what we're going to talk about as well. He writes me a very short note, and Charles is in Calgary. It's not on your news, but I'm watching live major rioting in Toronto, or as they would say, Toronto. A group called the Black Bloc, a loose collection of a few thousand hardcore anarchists, is smashing store windows, burning cop cars, overturning mailboxes. Oh, John's not going to like that. Burning trash bins, Molotov cocktails,
Canadian mail.
And then there's more than 1,000 onlookers and people who live in the apartments downtown. Eaton Center is in lockdown, and all the shoppers can't get out. This is a major shopping mall right downtown. Too bad this couldn't happen, Boxing Day or something. The Royal York Hotel, where all the leaders are in this, was it the G20 by now or whatever, is only...
Well, it depends whether they can call it a G8 meeting or a G20. It depends on who they let in the door.
All right, so we'll say G28. The hotel where everybody's staying is only 2 blocks away from where the gas attacks are, because this is crazy, and it's supposed to be 2 days of this. Well, if we've not all heard of it, why haven't we, and when will we? Because eventually we will, but, it's always the anarchists. It's probably some kind of battalion of soldiers from all in North America where they get to wear all the black stuff and everything. So, but anyway, John, how does that fit in with what we're doing today? And I think we could say...
I think it fits in, what we see in this movie, They Live, by John Carpenter, which is in many ways very close to Ray Nelson's story, although there are some changes he did for cinematic reasons. It's gone on. I mean, anyone that thinks there's a hidden conspiracy to rule the world, and I think a lot of us are starting to come to that, can't help but watch this movie and nod their heads a little bit. Maybe it's not aliens, or maybe it is, but it's somebody. Mm-hmm. And this G20 group, I mean, these world leaders, these nations that send their representatives to these meetings, certainly are following orders. Mm-hmm. And they're the minions, and in They Live, we see humans selling out. And there's, we have a quote from the character played by the great character actor Buck Flowers. He says, "We sell out every day.
Yep.
May as well be on the winning team."
Yep. That was a great few lines, because he says, "It's business. Don't you guys understand it? There's no nations anymore."
Yeah, exactly.
And as the scriptwriters and Carpenter entered into their version of the short story, again, is very prescient, considering that the movie was made in 1988.
1988. And at the time, a lot of people took it as, well, this is just representative of the Reagan era, and he's trying to criticize consumption and capitalism. And, well, yeah, he is, but it's more than just the Reagan era. I mean, it's just everything that was going on, and the impetus from that time, where it seems like that's when, there was a lot of superficial patriotism in the 80s, but what did it lead to? It led to this rah-rah America, no matter what we do, even if we're working on things that our forefathers, whether you think they're good guys or bad guys.
I knew that was coming.
But the people that established this country would never have put... I mean, can you imagine in early 19th century if they said we've got to send the army into Iraq? I mean, what they did do, they sent the Navy to the Barbary Coast because they were pirates, and everyone was great with that. But taking over some country in the Middle East somehow they'd be appalled. But by the end of the 19th century, we were sending armies all over the world. So it didn't take long.
As that applies to the stories, and Nelson wrote his in '63, which is interesting as well. And I try to talk to him as little as possible because I want the questions to have the freshest answers. This is not an ambush thing, but for him to just do it right from the hip. It's always better the first time around. And what he saw at that time as well. But I would even say to you, John, with regard to the glasses, I would even say, and with regard to what you said about one of the first military sojourns by the United States, that with the glasses on, we are told in the history books we had to do that to keep those bad old Barbary pirates in check. But I'm wondering if, with the glasses on, it wasn't a case of now it's our turn to go imperialistic and take a trot around the world and get our legs underneath us. There's always a reason.
Well, I think you're right. As you look back on that, this is the Mediterranean. And sure, the United States, a lot of its original economy was based on trade, the slave trade, the rum trade, and et cetera, but the cotton trade. But what was our interest in keeping the Mediterranean open? One would think that Britain would have had more of an interest in clearing the pirates out. Why are we doing it?
Britain and France should have been able, and probably were able, to take care of it. And in fact, in one of the episodes, true episodes of what happened during that time, which is recalled by, well, actually it was a little later. It was with Teddy. It was a British emissary whose place was sacked by the, at that time, that version of the Barbary pirates, and then Teddy sent the boys over. So, that's...
Yeah, it is. I've always wondered about that, and you really brought, it's sort of in the background of my mind, but you just brought that forward, and, why are we doing that?
Yeah.
Or why was the United States doing it?
Well, it strikes me, interestingly, that there's only two things you have to know about us. One, the Monroe Doctrine, everybody stay out of this hemisphere or we'll kill you. Or the Manifest Destiny, which is if you get in our way and we want it, we'll take it and we'll kill you. So, there you go. All right. Yes, here we go. You also sent me a script, and I actually printed out the 2 pages that struck me as being very, very salient, and you just hit on part of it. But I don't know where you want to pick it up. I mean, do you want to get elemental and take a look at the characters, and in the good old college style, do those characters necessarily personify, any moves?
Just and a little bit more on John Carpenter.
Sure.
I mean, he's an interesting director. He's a guy who's sort of been an iconoclast in Hollywood, and he's made his best movies when he had the smallest amount of money to work with, and he's always been interested in the theme that things are not as they seem, and his considered his best movie is The Thing, or maybe Halloween too. Some people really like it, but The Thing is like you don't know. The Thing could be anything. It can shapeshift.
Okay, that was the second time around for The Thing. Yeah,
that was the second time around, and people say this is probably the remake that was better than the original. Although the original wasn't bad. It was a Howard Hawks production. James Arness played The Thing, but it didn't get so much into the shape-shifting aspect.
Oh, not at all. I don't think they would dare try to pull that on people.
Yeah, back then it was more. Yeah, it was different, but it was the original was good, but Carpenter did it better. So,
did Carpenter also do? Did he do Fog? With
he did The Fog. He did. Then he did some. He did Prince of Darkness. He did. There are a whole lot of them.
Well, to me, the most interesting thing about him is that he was married to Adrienne Barbeau, which is like, all right.
Yeah, he got the best years out of Adrienne, so you got to give him credit for that. He was married to his assistant scriptwriter. Because John Carpenter wrote the script to They Live under the name of Frank Armitage, who's also the character in the film. Frank Armitage was a character in an H.P. Lovecraft story. I can't remember which one off the top of my head, but he was a great admirer of Lovecraft. Well, also Lovecraft, the theme that runs through all of his stories is that there is a darkness in the universe that it's beyond the kind of horror darkness that we normally think about. It's just so alien that we can't conceive.
Is that supposed to be funny?
It's no.
Alien.
Lovecraft was another odd character, one of those Providence guys that shut up and lived alone most of his life. So.
He's a Rhode Island guy?
Yeah, he's Providence.
Oh.
Providence guy. I don't know if his house. He lived in the same house for many years in Providence, I believe, but I don't know if it's still there. But he's an interesting old coot too. And he's done a lot of his stories have been made into movies too, and not many of them very well. But that's a whole different story. That's a whole different subject.
Well, you named all those characters, and also Stephen King, and you start to wonder if the reason why these guys live in New England and do so well is because the winters are long.
Well, New England is a very odd place. You know, I grew up in New England. I grew up in the town of Scituate, Massachusetts, and there's a strange atmosphere in New England. And I still live in New England. I'm in Maine now, so it's just about one of the oldest areas in the country, and there's been a lot of time for odd things to happen. Of course, Lovecraft's themes are all about old things in New England that were here before humans got here, and still exist. From being
up there, I got to tell you, this is true. I believe. I mean, I say it tongue in cheek, but you can tell the timeline of the movement of Europeans through the United States by the dates on the tombstones in the cemeteries. There is no place in the world where you'll find older dead people than in New England. I mean, it's true, though, right?
It's very true. You find those ancient tombstones from the 1600s. You'll find right down the road from me here in Hiram. There are a lot of them. There's some from the 1700s, the 18th century. And Hiram was a rather founded a little later. It's sort of a frontier town back in the day, but there's an old cemetery down there, and it's fascinating to walk around these old cemeteries and check out the names, and the same names of the people you see living next door to you today.
Yep.
They've been here a long time. So.
All right, getting back to Carpenter, and you were just saying an interesting character, and of course I screwed around and threw us into a digression right away. But you were saying that he was an interesting guy, lived in Providence, and
Lovecraft lived in Providence. Carpenter actually is from, where is he from? He was born in North Carolina, was it, and grew up, I can't remember, but he is interesting. He's, like I said, he's made his best films on small budgets, and when he gets the big budgets, things tend to kind of fall apart, like he did that terrible Invisible Man movie, and he did some people split opinion on Big Trouble in Little China. He did that on a big budget, and that's got its moments, but he does better when he's strapped for cash, when he's not working for a studio, and he said that.
Well, there's something else about these guys, and I said with regard to Nelson, well, gee, he wrote this in 1963. We're the ones that came around to the idea that there is a plan for world domination only in the last 10 or so years. I'm wondering if Carpenter, guys like Ray Nelson, and I'll find out eventually, knew about this, because really the literature that speaks to this, the planning of it, and so glowingly, comes no later than the turn of the century, when you've got H.G. Wells being probably one of the main proponents of world government. So if people were somewhat, I hate to say this, well-read, or at least went outside the bounds of what you were given in college and elsewhere, you probably were very well aware of this, and it was a great plot line that the rest of us thought was just, that's really interesting, and boy, wouldn't that suck if it really happened?
Yeah, well, exactly, and the thing that they are taking advantage of is people don't want to think about it. They don't want their relatively comfortable, even if they're uncomfortable lives, to be shook up by this kind of horrific truth that, waving the flag and our politicians that we get so enthusiastic about, it doesn't matter. They're just taking orders. I mean, we look at the famous fight scene in They Live, which goes on and on and on, and maybe it was put there because, Roddy Piper's a wrestler and said, we need a real good fight scene in here. But it's basically about Piper's trying to get his friend to put the glasses on. That's all it is. Put the glasses on. Put them on. He wants him to see what he can see. And and he's resistant.
Actually, when I looked at that, and Lady Viz and I were watching, she said at the outset of the movie, well, how do they make a 2-hour movie out of something like a 8-page short story? And I said, the fight scene.
Yeah. But it goes on about 6 minutes or so, but it seems like it's longer because most fight scenes don't go on that long. And It's by the way, Carpenter was born in Carthage, New York.
Okay.
Grew up in Bowling Green, Kentucky.
We won't hold that against him.
No, we won't. But
what Gordon said about the fight scene, when I said to him, there's another thing in the short story I want to bring up later, but for now, when I talked to him about the fight scene in They Live, I said I thought it was kind of gratuitous, but I think he said something along the lines of what you're saying, and that is you can look at it as a metaphor of how hard it is to try to get people to see the way things really are.
Well, exactly. That's because just before the fight scene, when earlier in the film, when John Nada's talking to Frank, and Frank, there's the quote by Frank, "I've walked a white line my entire life. I'm not about to screw that up." And then John Nada says, the Roddy Piper character, "White lines in the middle of the road. That's the worst place to drive." So he's saying, but this is even before Nada can see, but you can see he's got an open mind. Mm-hmm. And and Nada says, there's another quote that Nada says, I believe in America, and I believe in the dream, and that's what I'm going to do. But when Frank is complaining about the conditions, and in this film it starts out, economic conditions are bad. Both of these men are itinerant laborers that have gone far from home to find work, and they're in L.A., and they're working, it looks like maybe under the table on this construction site. And that's where Frank's complaining about things, but at the same time he's complaining about the situation, but then he's saying things like also about, I'm just trying to walk a white line because I've got a wife and a family and I can't screw up.
Well, two things about that. One, that line about the white line is kind of all throughout literature, and I mean even scripturally, the story about you're neither hot nor cold, you're lukewarm, and you will be spit out. Another statement about having one leg on each side of the fence, you're going to wind up with having your torso rent. Also, what I see today with a lot of the folks that I go back and forth with, or the literature I see, there's a lot of people who get upset with me or won't listen anymore, and I understand it. Because I'm telling them what I understand completely to be the truth, and that is this is a monolithic thing that you cannot stop. You have to figure out a strategy by which you can live with this. They choose not to want to believe that, but then on the other hand, they don't do anything, and this is not a criticism for today. But my point is, where are you then? Where are you? Because to me, if you think somehow, some way, you're going to lead the cavalry over the ridge and take the day, probably when you're confronted with the boogeyman, you're going to foul yourself and do anything that it tells you to do. This bit about being in the middle, and just like you said with that character, he believes in the American dream, but he had to leave a Detroit that was absolutely decimated economically.
Yeah, they have the quote about, when the steel companies asked us for help, we gave them help, and what did they give themselves? Raises.
Yeah, it's another prescient thing. Well, I guess not, 'cause they've always done that, yeah.
That's what they do. We see it just getting cranked up to a higher level, all the way to 11 now. It's like there's no shame at all.
No, and good point. And remember something too, unless you and speak to this, please. When the Goldman Sachs guys or whoever they were on Wall Street, Goldman Sachs has become obviously the identification with the whole Wall Street thing. I believe they got those bonuses. I heard all the Senate doing its yada yada, and its baboon posturing, da 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 da. But as far as I know, they got them. But everybody.
Well, they made money for the company. And not only that, they eliminated half their, if not more of their competition at the same time. So they deserve those bonuses. But not, if you work there, you'd say, "Hey, great job." It's like high five,
Yeah, but once again, I mean, you hear all this. They give them a little public fanny tapping, and like we had this last one. If you saw the four heads up there, not the guys with the oil company, but Goldman Sachs, whatever. I mean, they sat there and looked across the tables at these guys with just veiled malevolence. I mean, they hated the fact they had to be there, but it was part of the job. And then tomorrow, everything goes on as it was, and Americans forget about it because they're on to the next new tragedy, of which there will be no solution. For which.
Right. And also, one more thing about the white line quote, you've got to also take into account that this is a black man talking, and he might be alluding to the fact that he's walked the white man's way.
Yeah.
Whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there might be a little of that because Carpenter usually throws a little, racial stuff in there, and so that's maybe an allusion to that, although it's not explicit.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's more like the middle of the road thing. Yeah, it's the worst place to drive sometimes. Get on one side or the other. Which way you're going to go, backwards or forwards. You stay in the middle, you'll be roadkill. And as far as the glasses go, that's true. I mean, if we had glasses like that, most people wouldn't want to put them on. They would fight, fight to stop it. They wouldn't want to admit it. Those Hoffman lenses, they don't want them. They don't want to see them. They don't want to look. And I sometimes when I run into people like that don't even want to listen, I have a term. I call them fire hydrants. It's like talking to a fire hydrant.
Yeah. And we know what dogs do to them.
True.
Males, at least.
But I do the John Nada character though. It's a very interesting character. Like he says that right at the beginning of the movie when he starts walking to the construction site behind Frank, and Frank looks at him and says, aren't you going to say anything? And he says, and Nada says words to the effect that, I need to see where I'm going before I, before I talk about it or anything, something like
mm-hmm.
that. He needs to see first. And right at the beginning, he establishes that. And then once he does put on the glasses and he can see, there's no hesitation in his mind what he wants to do. He has no compunctions, no guilt. He sees an alien, kill it. It's just pretty simple for him. As soon as he puts on those glasses and the police confront him, and of course he's very careful to only kill aliens. He doesn't want to kill any humans.
Mm-hmm.
And he has no problem with it. He's not a conflicted hero at all. And that's one of the endearing things about him in an action movie, and it's pretty clear cut. So that's what makes it a good action movie, is that he can see who the enemy is. Even though he's reluctant to kill humans, and some of them are on the alien side, he doesn't like to kill them, although he does kill one at the end.
Yeah, but now that's interesting too, because I'm assuming, and you'll tell me if I'm right or wrong here, one of the capabilities of the aliens, or in this case, one of the humans that went over to the other side, is the ability to disappear.
Right, they have some kind of a handy-dandy little, some kind of a field generator on their watches that allows them to escape. And, they use it when they're in trouble. Those that have, gone on to the alien side. I don't know if everybody's got one, but...
Yeah, so we're not...
And the aliens have them, too.
They do, all right, okay. That's what I want to know.
Right, because one of the aliens in the bank, right after Nada starts to see, and he walks into the bank for some reason, and he sees a bunch of aliens in there, and he blows them all away with the shotgun he got from the police. One of the aliens at the end is he can see him, and he's talking to his handy-dandy wristwatch. We have one here who can see, and he's describing him, and Nada says to him, Mama don't like tattletales, and he's about to blow him away, and then the alien disappears, so he knows they have the ability to sort of a Star Trek kind of thing.
Yeah, and I wonder if there's anything there, too, with regard to, if we're going to draw out this metaphor, whether or not, this is what I was talking about, when those who wish to take, let's just call them they, when they get in trouble, they have this ability to just disappear, and I harken back to what I was saying somewhat, and I don't think this is that much of a stretch about like the 4 Goldman Sachs guys or whatever. When those who will never get touched look like they might be, there's this just not happening of anything. There's time, the news blitz comes in, and you forget about it. And I'm just wondering if there's anything there. I'm not sure. But I think they have the ability to just get very small and avoid further scrutiny.
Yeah, they have, if not to literally disappear, to disappear as far as we're concerned.
Right.
They can retire out. They can, change jobs. Because it's people say it's the corporation, which is this fictional person now that we've given human rights to, is now the is what's left, and there may be nobody left in that corporation that did all that stuff, but it doesn't matter, and you can't do anything to a corporation anyways. And by the way, I just came across a note. They is an acronym for the hierarchy enslaving you, supposedly.
Okay, that's good.
That's a little tidbit on the side. So let's. So we go on and we have the fight, and then we have collaborators. Like we went over the Buck Flowers character, the drifter, and he's basically sold out for money, and we went over his quotes about that. And basically, I think you can probably look at the world of They Live that anyone that's doing pretty well is a collaborator. Because there's when Nada walks into the grocery store soon after he can see there's an alien talking to a human, and the human is saying, I don't know, I can't seem to get anywhere, and the alien is saying, well, keep trying, if things will work out for you. And the guy's sort of scratching his head, and the human says to the alien, I don't know, I wish I could do as well as you, or words to that effect. And he doesn't know he's talking to an alien. And I think another interesting character we see right at the beginning is the blind preacher. And he's blind, but he can see better than most. He lays it right out at the beginning what's going on. He tells you that we're enslaved by snake-tongued demons or devils with poison on their tongues, and they, of course, he turns out to be part of the rebels, and we later see he's getting a vicious beating from the police, and that's one of the other things. This is before Nada can see. He's walking when they go in, and the police are sent in to level the homeless camp. And then Nada is getting away, and he looks in an alley, and the police are pounding on this preacher, the blind preacher. And they're just viciously beating him up, and Nada is looking at this. And this is starting to make him think about, what's going on here. Mm-hmm. He's starting not to believe in the American way anymore when he sees that.
Let me ask you something about the preacher. I watched the flick again last night, and something I watched afterwards is kind of interesting too, but later on. But when you see Raymond St. Jacques, the preacher character, is he mouthing, or is he the origin of the words that are coming out of the bearded man character that's the one that gets to hack in on TV?
Well, the bearded man is, I think he represented a group of scientists that have figured out what's going on, because obviously they've been able to manufacture these glasses. And Raymond St. Jacques, the preacher, he's involved with them. It's evident. I assume it's his church where they were using as a headquarters to store their equipment, supplies, and which was raided by the police.
But what did you make out of him lip syncing?
Well, I see him as almost a Tiresias character. In Greek mythology, Tiresias was the blind prophet, and he got in trouble by. He pissed off the goddess Hera he found some copulating snakes, and he beat them to death with his staff, I think is the story. And Hera got pissed off, and because the snakes must have been holy to her or something, and she turned him blind. And then later on, he was also supposedly also turned into a woman for 7 or 8 years.
Okay.
And actually had children.
Oh, that'll do it to you.
And then he was known as someone who lived full lives as both a man and a woman. Of course, people do that every day.
Every day now. Yes, and you can see him on. Look at that, Jerry Springer. Yeah. But
Tiresias he got in trouble by going after the snakes and was turned blind for it. But actually, as a compensation for his blindness, he was given the gift of prophecy. And he could actually listen to he could interpret the voices of birds who supposedly were auguries of the future, and he could hear them and knew what they were saying, so he knew what would happen.
So you see
So I see the preacher as someone who could see the truth, speak the truth despite his blindness. And actually, he was probably better off that he was blind because he didn't see all the propaganda. He could just sense what was really going on.
And that seems to be somewhat of an echo of what happens in 8 o'clock in the morning when the Nada character, who's the protagonist in that story, doesn't want TVs on. So
Right.
in that case, you deliberately blind yourself by not watching the tube.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes. Yeah. And I think that's what they're saying. You're better off turn off the TV. You know, because that's how they were hypnotizing the populace in both in the story and the movie. It was like some kind of a carrier wave on television that was sort of lulling you with this sense of this hypnotism, this sense of doing all the things no independent thought, consume, submit, stay asleep, obey and conform. This is your God. All that stuff was coming across on the television. But there were also, like, transmitters here and there around town, like that one they showed on the stoplight, that was also sending out messages to the populace, sort of going around. And sometimes when I drive by cell phone towers, I see all that crap on them, and I wonder, what the hell are they generating there besides telephone calls?
Yeah, exactly. And as you might have not heard me say down here, because Florida really has not much of it doesn't have much topography, your sight lines, your horizons can last forever. And it's not unusual to be driving anywhere in the state, and always be within eyeshot of a tower. And you have to wonder, and of course I do believe that's got another impact awaiting us. Also, I just wanted to bring something else out, and I'm sorry I couldn't find this. This bit about sunglasses and such, there is a young adult book that I've been trying to remember the title of. And it had to do with a child who had a pair of glasses, I believe were sunglasses, could slide them on and it would alter reality. And I just remember one of the slogans from the book was 2 + 2 = 3. Stuff like that, you know. And I'm sorry.
That sounds a little familiar to me. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's a classic, which is why we had to read it when I went back to get certified to teach. And I've been trying like crazy to get a hook on it. But the reason I bring it up is I'd only like to see when that was written, just for whatever that might lead to. Whether that had something to do with this. Actually, it probably had to predate the movie. But how about the book? I don't know. But it's a motif, you know, that I'm sure has been used in other ways as well, and that is obviously having clarity of vision. So, if anybody knows what that short story it is, no, it's a book. It's a book. Young adult novel, glasses. Somebody tell me I'm going crazy.
I'm sure someone will help you out.
Yeah, Comstock might even know, yeah.
But, okay, so where do we want to go next with this? I mean, basically, the movie takes place basically in the city of Los Angeles, and then we have the homeless camp, the church, the bank, the store, and
let me ask
Cable 54 is where the climax occurs.
Station 54.
Yes.
Right. No, one thing I want to ask you, Paul Santu asked me to check something else out. I didn't necessarily find it. It's supposed to be in the movie. I didn't really hear it or see it. Do you know if they mentioned the names of at least 2 camps where people like the homeless cities or whatever?
Well, you know, I was trying to catch that. I rewatched the movie last night myself, and I'm watching it, and they had a name for the camp, but I missed it. I should have rewound to hear what it was, because I wanted to know if that camp had a name, and they mentioned it, but it seemed like whoever said it was slurring it a little bit or speaking really fast, and I didn't catch it. And I didn't rewind to see what they were saying because it was getting late, and I wanted to finish watching the movie.
I thought they came through with it, but it didn't sound like anything that
It's not in the script?
Well, all right, here's what I did. Paul said, I believe they used 2 camp names that were used at Guantanamo. One was Delta, one was X-Ray. So I watched the movie with the intent of trying to pick that up as well. I didn't. And then I got to a point where the camps are no longer mentioned as far as I can remember. Then
I think there was only... Yeah, I can only remember one time where they actually mentioned the name of the place, and it was early on. It was, you know, right.
Yes, it would have to be, right. And also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, and I didn't catch it. Like I said, I wanted to, and I was a little lazy. I didn't rewind to get
what I tried to do with your PDF that you sent me, which obviously was the script of the dialogue, I tried to do a find on Delta, and it didn't kick anything up. That's not necessarily the end of it.
Yeah, well, that wasn't a formal script. I found that online, and it was done by a fan who tried to transcribe the movie as best he could. So it's not by any means an official script that Carpenter wrote.
But
I looked for that and I couldn't find it. I looked everywhere. I looked on all the usual sites where you find documents like that, and I couldn't find it.
Well, my thought about the fact that if those names were used in the movie, my question, which is a little more unsettling, is if our government did that with a wink and a nod to it being in They Live, what the hell does that mean?
Well, that's true. But, the military commonly uses the phonetic alphabet to name things, November, X-ray, Delta, hotel, all of the familiar, the words they use to designate letters in the military, because when you're doing a transmission in the military, you never just say A or B or C. You always use the phonetic word for it, because it eliminates any, D sounds like C sometimes in a bad transmission. So. Well,
we like the cop once that we heard calling in a license plate, and he gets to like X is in X-ray, Y is in Wyoming.
Yeah.
Protect and serve, baby, but you can't spell. Oh boy. Let me ask you this. First of all, I was never really a wrestling fan, and I don't know that you were either. But
not a big fan, no. But
Roddy
Piper was a magnetic, charismatic wrestler in his day, and he has an interesting story himself. He, some of what he said when he's recounting his youth and how he left home early and everything, a lot of that applies to him. I guess he was born in Scotland and went to Canada young and left home young and moved around a bit. So he's an interesting character himself.
I thought he did I was going to say, for somebody who isn't an actor like an athlete, but I shouldn't say that. Straight out, he did a decent job. If he underplayed the role, but what he did, then fine. I think it was meant to happen, because just as what you had said about his background, he's one of these characters who looks, and he portrayed this in the character in the movie, as if, nobody knows the trouble I've seen. And he's got that kind of like world weariness on him.
Yeah, that shrug he does. Well, he took the role very seriously. It was his first role, and Carpenter, I guess, is a big wrestling fan, and he ran into Piper at a wrestling match or something, and just said to him offhand, I want you to be in my next movie. And Piper sort of said, yeah, sure, okay. And then he got a call from him, and they hooked up, and he actually got the role, and he took it seriously. He took acting lessons, I guess, for several months, and he tried to tone himself down in places. Of course, some of that old wrestler attitude comes out, like in the fight scene and in the bank when he says, I'm here to kick ass and chew bubble gum, and I'm all out of bubble gum. That he said I guess he said that was a line he worked on that he used in wrestling once, or something like he would have used in wrestling, and he wanted to put something like that in the film. So, and I think he did a great job. He is a charismatic character, and he did tone it down the way he had to, and he did some real acting in it. It wasn't just your typical, jock trying to act. I thought he did well. Now, there's another movie he did that I had to get. I haven't seen it yet. I got the DVD, and it's called Death Comes to Frogtown, and that was his other big movie. I have to see it. And in that movie, the world is ruled, I guess, by frog-like amphibians, and he plays a character called Death. So
beautiful.
More of the same theme. I have no idea what happens in it, but
he's probably
I'll be watching it shortly.
He's probably out to croak the frogs.
I'm sure he is.
Can I get a rim shot on that? Yeah.
Ka-ting.
Going back to his character, though, too, and I just want to throw this in. When I was watching it, just kind of a little bit on a stretch, but like I said, I kind of related to the world weariness, and I think he did it well. You don't have to do that necessarily in anything else except facial features and posture and such, and an attitude that comes beyond or exists beyond what's given to us through the character's dialogue. But sometimes the look on his face, he reminded me of another actor who just looked like the world kicked the crap out of him, and that was David Jansen.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, David Jansen, of course,
The Fugitive.
Because of The Fugitive, but even in some of the other movies he made after the fact, he was always a character who had a lot of tolerance because he had seen it all, felt it all. He wasn't necessarily angry at everybody. I think he just thought it wasn't worth it,
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah, Jansen, it's a lot of that same feeling between the two.
Also, what I found interesting, and this is the aside I just want to throw out at this point. Not a big deal, but there's a character. What is his name? I think it's Peter Jansen. Jansen played kind of like the street activist in They Live, who kind of was really the head underground guy who was getting the glasses, moved out, and all this. You remember that?
Yeah.
Well, come to find out, and this happened after I watched They Live last night, we hit Alien Nation, the movie. And who happened to be in that but Peter Jansen? And that movie came out a month earlier than the release of They Live. And, of course, Alien Nation had James Caan as their stud star. And I think that's the movie that birthed that series that ran for some time. But again, and the duo in that movie, obviously, was Caan and one of the aliens. So, but I had to laugh that the guy made two movies. Both of them were in 1988. They were released a month apart, and he was both of them. And, of course, Alien Nation was released, like I said earlier.
Right. Well, another bit of trivia. If you look at the scene when the police break in on the resistance meeting, there's Tommy Morrison, the boxer, has a bit part as a resistance fighter in there.
Morrison was in They Live?
He was in They Live. He has a small role. He was young. I think he was about 20 at the time, before he had won anything. And he's supposedly in that resistance scene when the police break in and start shooting everybody.
Okay, so he's one of the resistors then.
He's one of the resistors.
Yeah, then Morrison went on to be in one of the
beat
Rocky
Foreman
movies.
in a fight, and he was a champion in one of the boxing organizations for a while, and then of course it came out that he had the HIV virus, and that was it for him.
Yeah, and then he was in a Rocky movie, remember?
Yeah, that's right.
As one of the antagonists. One thing I noticed, do you want to switch over to 8 o'clock in the morning for a second?
Sure, yeah.
Now, in that movie, in that short story, what was not explained, and in short stories this often happens, but I'm going to have to ask Ray about it because it is intriguing. We look at the Nada character, and that's the other thing. Are we to take anything with the name Nada? Because Nelson's a California boy. He lives in El Cerrito right now.
Well, Nada means nothing in Spanish. So,
right.
In the short story it's George, and in the movie it's John, although they never say his name John.
Okay.
In the script, supposedly Carpenter says he's John Nada in the movie, and George in the short story. For what it's worth, whatever difference it makes, I don't know.
But in the short story, there's a line that just jumped out at me, and it's when Nada goes to the police, a commissioner or a captain, is it? And he calls him his control. Did you notice that at all?
Yeah, I remember that. And that is very interesting. I got the impression in the story that everyone had a control. But another interesting thing about the story is instead of it's like They Live is more like a buddy movie. Him and Frank, they're kind of like each other from the beginning, but of course they have this weird buddy fight where they crack smiles and jokes in the middle of it, and they still keep pounding each other. And then they go on together to kill aliens. But in the short story, it's not a buddy story. He has a girlfriend he has to convince, and she thinks he's crazy when he goes home. And then she's horrified when he kills an alien that knocks on the door to see what's going on. And, of course, in the short story, we get a little more of an indication of specifically what the aliens are after when Nada goes into the apartment of the aliens he killed and finds dead body parts and babies and things like that in the refrigerators. And so in the story, they indicate that it's actually they're eating humans, is the suggestion. Whereas in the movie, Carpenter says that they're basically changing the earth so that they can survive better. They're actually changing the environment and changing the air and the water. And sometimes looking at what's happening today, you wonder if the same thing isn't going on.
Well, I mean, some of the really hard things to share with people are the most obvious. Now, what a surprise that is. But I mean, this whole bit about fluoridation of water. If you were to say that in a public gathering today, they'd laugh their heads off. And
yeah, it's been trivialized. It's like fluoridation is considered. Oh, that's what people worried about. Those anti-communist crazy birches were worried about in the 50s, and no one actually investigates the situation. Like, I don't know if it was you in a recent program mentioned that, or somebody, but I happen to see this every now and then. I watch Rachel Maddow on MSNBC in the evening.
Well, that'll do it to you.
And yeah, and she besides there was an otherwise excellent. She was doing otherwise excellent thing about BP, and then she just mentioned off the hip, just it's sort of like off the hip, like with a sort of rolling the eyes, like, oh, these are like the people concerned about fluoridation, just an off the cuff, hardly, just went by real quickly. It's like they try to. It's almost like they reinforce this fluoridation wackos over and over, and nobody actually investigates it. And they don't tell you that there are countries now that are going back and defluoridating the water. It's like, oh well, this is accepted now. This is what we do.
But just
it's like you've bought into it. You obey, sleep, stay asleep, and submit. This is what it's like. This is how they stick it into everything.
But that you mentioned this, and that's something as far as what they were, what both Carpenter and Nelson were putting forth, is this underlying, not really subconscious, but below the radar screen type of thing that media uses. And of course, they don't create the stuff. They're a pipeline that conveys it. But I mean, one of the things I found really interesting is in half-hour like local news shows, what usually precedes the nightly news, and even in the morning, sometimes the one-liners that the talking heads spit out, I stand there sometimes and wonder, why did you do that? Just like what you said about Maddow, which is, although a little bit more of an obvious thing. This happens, this is when they spout all the, some of the most arcane tests that medical, foundations are doing. It's found out that if you eat a mouse, you'll live, 7 times longer or something. You know what I mean? And it's like, why did you even say that? And that's part, I think, of this whole programming. Now, with the fluoridation thing, what I found interesting, and we're not going down that road, I understand, but here's how we've forgotten when the sands of time kind of like are washed across this. And I've said this before, maybe you've heard it, 1963, November, went through all the months, New York Times, looking for the mythical speech that Kennedy made at Columbia, which did not happen, where he foretells his death, didn't happen. Anyway, as I'm looking for the speech, I come across a front page ad by a consortium of doctors who were importuning the Manhattan Council, do not fluoridate the water. It is a drug, get this, of mass medication. And it gave now here we are in 1963, a bunch of brave doctors were like, please don't do this. And when they were trying
Really, I mean, it's involuntary medication is exactly what it is. And even if it was good, it shouldn't happen.
Excellent point. And when they were thinking about doing it down here, and somebody ran a story about it and quoted the head of the county commissioners, I actually mailed her a packet of information, and one of it is, then how do you explain this? Are all the doctors in Manhattan in 1963 crazy? All right? And then she called me back, and we had this discussion. And in the end, she goes, well, I don't think we're probably not going to do it. And I said, okay. She goes, because it's too cost effective. It's not cost effective. And I said, but you're not telling me that it's because it's bad for you. I said, so you're not really buying it. You're just telling me it's not going to happen, but I'm not going to be, sated with that kind of answer. And that's how it goes. It's like, hello. I felt like I was knocking on her head. Anybody in there? But
well, it seems it's like, I think there'll be a time if there's ever any kind of enlightenment at all, they're going to look back on this age as like we look back on bloodletting as a medical approach to anything. Maybe in rare cases bloodletting would help, but they used to do it for everything. And we look back on it as insanity now. And I think they're going to look back on some of the things we're doing routinely now as insanity, whether it's fluoridation or giving statins, which to people with high cholesterol, and supposedly it's good for your heart. And the main, this is a little an aside, and the main side effect of a statin is myopathy. It damages muscles. So why would you do something for your heart that damages muscles, which is the heart? Heart is a muscle.
Yeah.
And it's crazy.
The sad thing about it, the really, really tragic thing about all this, and that is, in those days when they let blood, probably there was no better idea what was going on. But in this day and age, whenever I see, people getting out there, I'm not knocking this. When the American Cancer Society wants people to come out, and heart foundations or whatever. But the thing, I'm thinking about inside is that, but you guys either know exactly what heals this, or what cures this, or you don't know. But we know that I won't say the technology, but the cure exists, and we're not getting it. That's why I feel it's so.
Well, it's not in the interest of the medical establishment to cure anything.
No, it's not.
It's more in their interest to control it. If they control it in a person so that they still need the medical establishment and they can't get away from it, that's the ideal thing. A true cure for a condition is not a desirable state for the medical establishment or a pharmaceutical company. They just want you to create a drug, never anything that would cure anything, but they want to control it so that you need the drug for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and that has side effects.
What they want.
Well, it has side effects as well. And we'll be seeing that, I'm sure, in the next 10 years or so. I'm saying that because you'll get more and more people who have been on medications longer. In the old days, I never heard, my mother or father ever say anything about cholesterol or blah, blah, blah. It didn't happen. There was nobody that I knew that was on blood pressure medication. And you could say, well, that's a shame. I don't know about that. But the thing is, this was not an issue. The same thing with Viagra. It's like, okay, so what did everybody do? What did males do back in 1930? It's nuts. But, so anyway, we get into this whole idea about being absolutely dependent upon pharmaceuticals, which are synthetic medications, and that's going to have after effects, what I would assume that's going to be as bad as what we're seeing with Alzheimer's. And that is with body organs like the liver and such and filters just blowing out because they never understood what this stuff was anyway, and it finally beat them up, And talking about death, this is what I wanted to bring up as well. Well, we got, there's nothing like in a story like the dying hero thing. And we have in both the short story, 8 o'clock, and in the movie, They Live, we both have the protagonists, in the case of They Live, dying. Now, since we've been in 8 o'clock in the morning for a little bit, and before we do, just to clear up this thing about the control, and it ties into the death thing. So now we have somebody who's awake, who I guess they don't know is awake, and the guy that sits on top of him, his handler, is his controller. In this case, it's the police chief, what is his name, Robinson. Okay, so I got to find out why Nelson did that, but I would assume the answer might be everybody's got a controller. In fact, I hate to be jumping back and forth, but who does the female, Meg Foster, in They Live? Does she not call her controller as well?
She calls someone, either her boss, or she called the police first, I think, because the police started showing up.
Right.
And she must have called someone else because when they showed that conversation of her on the phone, it didn't sound like she was talking to police.
Okay. Yeah, that's my remembrance as
well.
So
I figured it was someone at Cable 54. Or
a confidant of sorts.
Right.
Okay.
And,
now, in the short story, Nada is told, and you wonder if this is somewhat ties into the hypnotic thing, was he not really clearly out of it. But he's told by his controller that he's going to die the next morning at 8 o'clock.
Right.
So he goes off on this rampage, more or less, of course, in the name of good, to knock out as many of the aliens as possible, and of course try to get the message out, which apparently he does, that they can tell, that the populace can tell who they are. Now we have in the movie, and we can probably guess for the cinematic impact, the big shootout at the end where also Piper is killed, the protagonist in that movie. Have you made anything out of the fact that the one seems to die because of pre-program and the other goes down, with the old hail of bullets?
Well, it's just the theme in the short story. there's some kind of hypnotism at work, or some kind of a suggestion, and the hero of the short story doesn't know. I think he really doesn't know if that suggestion will work, but he's aware of it.
Yes,
he's aware of it because he has overcome. See, that was. I'd like you to ask the author of the story. Since he was aware of the hypnotism involved, and that he was subject to hypnotic programming, why couldn't he resist a suggestion that he was intellectually aware of, since he had overcome the programming, and why did that suggestion work, or was it just a literary device, if he even thought that far about it. I think it's a very effective story. Mm-hmm. And, because I was reading the story thinking, well, he's overcome this programming and he's not going to die. But he does. The programming worked in the end, and he died of a heart attack right on schedule.
But do we know whether Nada was aware of the fact that it would happen? You can't.
Yeah, because he heard the suggestion, didn't he? In the story, I mean, he knew he was given that suggestion. Yeah. He knew he only had a little while to get it done if the suggestion was going to work.
Robinson told him that. That's right.
Yes, he was told.
Yes.
But I'm surprised that Robinson didn't tell him to immediately die of a heart attack. If I was the controller, that's what I would have done.
But what the thing would be is that he's unaware of what Nada will be up to, or has been up to, and will
right.
Be.
He didn't know that Nada would do this, do what he ended up doing.
And then,
there are holes in the story, and there are holes in the movie. I mean, for dramatic effect. I mean, they're not airtight, logical.
Well, what's
films.
Interesting? Yeah. But I'm thinking that whether or not, well, first of all, if I'm Nada, and this is in 8 o'clock in the morning, I guess I would believe that it might happen, because why would I call Robinson and tip him off about what I know and what I'm up to?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the programming is very strong. It's strong. Even in our lives, I mean, we're aware of. We're being manipulated from day to day, and I'm sure sometimes you buy a thing and then you take it home and you say, why the hell did I buy this? We all do it. What got me to buy this particular thing that I happen to buy? And just think about every time. That's what I try to do myself, is think about why I do certain things, especially purchases. What's causing me to buy this, whatever it is, this box of cookies.
Think about it. Every time you walk into a chain of any consequence, and I would say whether it's Lowe's or Home Depot or your supermarket, just think about all the psychology and science that went into, and it's there. I mean, this is
absolutely.
Yeah, as to human behavior and what it does and how they can manipulate it. I mean, from the point is that, like, for instance, does everybody in the world not walk through the doors of their supermarket and go to the right? Sometimes I go to the left and I'm thinking I'm getting away with something.
I'm in trouble now. I went the wrong way.
I went to the left. Yeah, I'm just waiting for somebody to turn around.
Well, if you notice, if you're in a supermarket and you start walking like the wrong way, like people come out and they look at you like, like, what are you walking this way for?
Yeah.
If you do go.
That's true. You come out the exit, they get pissed off.
Clockwise or whatever.
Well, you still got a jerk.
They give you a little look. You're not supposed to be here walking that way.
One thing I found out early, when I was certainly not thinking about life like I am now, back in the mid-'80s, myself and a cohort had a little advertising agency going. And we got involved with one client who was involved in, I guess you could call it, almost like virtual reality in a sense. In other words, what they were involved is making software so that you, the shopper, and it's your eyes, you go down an aisle, you go down like the horizontal line, aisles, you turn right or whatever, and you look down a complete virtual aisle. And what they would do is, if they had a client that was into actually manufacturing something, let's say tomato sauce, they would color a label and try to get a facing on a certain level, so that if somebody looked down the aisle, their eyes would be drawn to that particular product. And that's where we were trying to do the advertising for the client, and that is this is what they were going to show manufacturers and how you can optimize manipulating buyers to come to your product rather than others. And I know, John, you know the whole story about the key aisle that you put stuff on. I mean, not the aisle, the shelf. The shelf
Right.
is usually eye level, and
Right. Well, yeah, and the vendors pay big money to get those prime locations.
But
they pay the market's bonuses for those prime locations.
Without a doubt.
It doesn't just happen.
But can you imagine all that went into that to try to predict, or actually predict a program, if you will, how shoppers will do? And by the way, I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but just tell me what you see. I go into the supermarket for very few things, because basically, we eat the organic beef and we'll go to the produce stand. So maybe I'll go in, I don't know, to get the odd head of lettuce or, something along the beer. That's it, beer.
Sure, yeah.
All right, the thing that I've noticed of the 3 chains that we have down here, every single one of them, this has happened to. And, of course, it's a brain trust decision. What I'm finding more and more, in any particular product, and I'll say tomato sauce because once in a while I'll go out and just grab a raw can. There are no longer 6 manufacturers and basically your store made one. There's like just 2 or 3 now. The amount of manufacturers' products that are showing on the shelves, to me, have at least been halved. So that the choice is now just me and 1 or 2, maybe 3 at the most, and that's it. Have you noticed that at all?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I've noticed that. I don't know. That's the goal of capitalism, is to eliminate your rivals.
Yeah, what do they call it?
I think what they do is a lot of the big fish eat the little fish, and they buy a brand and then just eliminate it. And I think that's a lot to do with it.
And it's strange because if I do go, again, like I said, I try to pick up walnut oil to do most of the cooking in, the frying or whatever, saute. Mm-hmm. And I went to 2 places, 2 different supermarkets, and walnut oil is gone. And I know it's gone because, I bought it there, and I look and I look and I look, and I'm figuring it's me, and then what I'll do is I'll go to grapeseed oil. But the walnut oil is gone, and I'm wondering, okay, maybe it wasn't a big seller, but you had this also in the basic green section, where most of that stuff doesn't sell. Why did that one fall away? It may not be a big deal, but it's sometimes I look for stuff, and then all of a sudden...
Have you ever asked them why?
I haven't asked one of the honchos why, but I've asked like one of the, managers that we're on a nodding acquaintance because we've seen each other, so much. And they don't really know. It isn't like they're protecting anything. It's not their choices.
Well, see, now you're going to have to really hold your nose and go into Whole Foods and buy it.
Yeah. And okay, that's another whole story. But whole story, get it? No. There was a semolina pasta, not that white glue crap, that we got. Hodgson's Mills is one of the manufacturers, and these stores, 2 of the stores had that in there, and they put it, of course, into the funky green section. And then that starts to drift away as well. And I'm like, well, I just can't understand why you would dump it when you're going to be in a selective place and you're charging more money for it. Now, that's available in Tampa. You're right, in a Whole Foods store. But I tell you what, I know they want to make a buck, but, some of that stuff is like price gouging, and I'm like, come on, man, it doesn't have to be this big,
Whole paycheck, that's what they call it.
Yep. All right. So as we wrap this thing up, at least with regard to the deaths, would we kind of agree, do we know that because you have a visual product like They Live, that we need the rooftop shootout scene complete with, sparklers, dims, and all this other stuff?
Yeah, sure, it's cinematic. But, it's funny, I was looking at some of the contemporary critical reception of that movie, and of course it was universally panned by the big newspapers and critics, and they never even looked at the theme. At the time, they just looked at this movie as an adventure movie. They didn't even take at all seriously the theme of it, that, we're all living in a world that is, a world of glamour, where we're not seeing the way it really is. and which is what Carpenter was trying to say. And all the reviews at the time by the big critics, they just reviewed it as an adventure movie, and they'd pick on this flaw in the plot or the bad acting or the cheesy effects, and they didn't get the point of the movie at all. It's kind of fascinating.
Well, could it be two things? One, most of these folks have no clue, and really where we're going with this is world government. I mean, what it all boils down to is world government, whether it's by your own or whether it's by aliens. But the thing is, these stories all talk about world rule. Now, most people in 1988, especially those that are going to be critics, have no clue about this whatsoever. So they look at it and think the whole thing is fatuous.
Right. And then, and it's curious at the end of the movie when you have the alien news commentator after the satellite uplink has been destroyed by NADA, and he's there complaining about filmmakers like John Carpenter and and the gratuitous violence in their movies. And that's exactly the kind of reviews Carpenter was getting for this movie. It's kind of ironic.
Well, but it's like the critics also have been brainwashed. So they go in there and they know it's a Carpenter movie they're going to see, and what is the subliminal in their heads? I will not like this.
Exactly. Well, I always say whenever you're watching a science fiction movie or a horror movie or a fantasy movie, you just can't go by the reviews that come out of the general media, the everyday media, because they just don't get it. They don't understand these movies. They don't know the point of them. Not that they're all universally good. In fact, there's a lot of dreck in them, but they just don't know how to review them or criticize them. They don't get it. Your average reviewer. You have to make a judgment for yourself on it. And I remember I saw this movie when it came out, and I was tremendously impressed by it. And then I remember reading the reviews at the time, and they were just, oh, this sucks. It's Carpenter. He should have stuck to making Halloween 3 or something. Come on. And Halloween itself, which was his first big hit movie, came out, and the reviews were terrible at first. And then people started to go for it, and this movie was making millions of dollars, and it was made for like $200,000 or $300,000. And suddenly a couple of reviews came out praising the movie, and suddenly all the reviewers re-reviewed it and said it's great. They're sheep. These people are sheep. They're afraid to think for themselves, and they praise what they think they're expected to praise and criticize what they think they're expected to criticize. They're self-governing. I don't think it's so much that they're programmed as that they are looking for what's expected from them. They know how to keep their jobs.
Yeah. There was a time when I would watch Siskel and Ebert mainly because I thought they were somewhat intelligent, and and sometimes they had a kind of tension when they went back and forth at each other. Sometimes I thought it was, all in the script, and then sometimes I wonder if it were. And I would watch them, but other than that, I mean, I couldn't care less what anybody says about stuff. I mean, it's just not a necessary item in my life. And I'm not saying it is in yours as well either, but it's like, what do I care what you think? If you pay me to go to see the movie, then I'll care what you think. But if I'm going in my pocket for the movie, please keep your opinion to yourself. And like you said, for the obvious reasons, they'll always go for the mass consumption thing. Anybody comes out and tries to do something risky, and it's like, I don't know if we like this or not.
Well, I like one more quote from the bearded man on one of his transmissions, and that's another theme in Carpenter movies. There are always like transmissions, broken up transmissions. Mm-hmm. You'll see that in a lot of his movies. But he says, "We could be pets, we could be food, but all we really are is livestock." And then I put a quote in my little email to you from Charles Fort, and he basically he put it all when he said back in the 1920s, "We are property." And I think that's salient. I think he was right.
Well, I'll get a chance to talk to Nelson, and that audio will accompany this audio. That interview is to be done as we're speaking today. That's supposed to be done tomorrow. And I'll find out what was in his head. It might have been more innocuous than we think. It may be exactly what we were thinking. I mean, that's what I'm kind of guessing about. With regard to Nelson, too, I'm just wondering if the events of November 22nd, 1963, and the 24th as well, had anything to do with this. It may not have had anything to do with it whatsoever. but of all the dates for it to be involved in, it could be coincidence it was 63. No doubt about it. But I'd like to know whether there was an impact on him, and this led to this kind of story. That's one of the things I'd like, to be clear about. Will it change it much? No, but if he has some thoughts about it, okay. And of course, both of these works are heavily anti-television, which thankfully, Carpenter didn't change. But I don't know why he would anyway, because I think he probably thought along the same lines as Nelson did.
I think so. And if you can, I'd like you to ask Mr. Nelson about his work with. He wrote a book with Philip K. Dick. Now, Philip K. Dick is another very interesting character.
Oh yeah.
The theme of his books are quite often things are not as they seem, and just as that's the theme of this story and this film. And if you could ask him about working with Dick, that'd be great.
That's probably going to be an hour in itself.
Yeah, because he did work with him on one book, and I think that's the only book by Dick I've never read. I've read all of them. I haven't, for some reason or another, I haven't read that one. I think it was something Ganymede, something or other, but I'll have to get a hold of that one.
And just in sum, I don't know if you ever heard me recollect how I even got involved in trying to find out the way things really are, but it came as a result of a graduate independent study project that I chose for myself about science fiction writers. And I remember, I had no idea about what I know now and why they seemed, and the science fiction writers of the half-century mark, those who wrote in and around 1950, a little bit each way, about the 21st century, and why they all portended really not such a great society, along with all the technology that made that possible, like TV and pleasure and movies and all this other stuff. And this is kind of along the same lines. Had I read 8 o'clock in the morning, it wouldn't have meant anything to me 20 years ago, or not much anyway. Now I look and I go, holy Toledo, what did he know? So,
yeah, well, you wonder, are they prophetic, or were they in the know?
Yeah.
What's the story? Was it Tiresias, or was it the drifter who's working with them? We don't know. Was it the blind preacher who can just see it and sense it? We don't know. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on in the middle of the 20th century, and Ray Nelson was in the middle of it, so that should be a good talk.
Yeah. All right. Of course, I'm looking forward to it, and he's an interesting character, no doubt. But anyway, we could probably run with a lot of plot lines in this and a lot of metaphors. But I think that also, that's for people to do, and it can also make it very didactic. But I just think that you and I both agree, and Gordon was one of the guys that, first said to me, how did you ever get through life and not see They Live? And I didn't, But again, here we are, and I think we all realize that there was something very prescient. As you just said, were they in the know, or did they guess well? I got to believe, at least in Dick's case too, and this doesn't make these guys bad guys. They probably knew. The old story about whatever's happening now was probably in R&D 50 years before. And I think that's a pretty accurate statement.
Well, as the preacher said, our owners, they have us, they control us. Wake up. Wake. They are all about you.
Yeah, and if you think back to George Carlin, did you ever catch that 5 to 7 minute rant about they own you?
Yeah.
They're in the big club and you don't belong to it.
Yeah, we're contract laborers is what we are.
Well, I look at that, and it's been almost expunged from YouTube. In fact, they might have just finally gotten rid of the whole thing. I saved the audio. It's around here, and don't be surprised if it shows up at the end of this interview. But I had when those people were laughing, and laughing in support. The thing that struck me is that these people are probably of one party, and thinking that's the other party that he's talking about when Carlin's talking about the whole political scam, the whole stage show that we've been given. Once again, you got to put the glasses on to realize that what you're seeing up there in D.C. or down there in D.C. is not the real deal. And I just think a lot of that audience that day was just being, probably, if I guess right, it's probably they were anti-Republican. But it's like, no,
yeah,
folks.
it goes a lot further than that. That's got really little to do with it. It's Basically, as the rebel leader said, we'll do anything for riches.
Yeah.
He's talking about all the people that were turning and working with them, with they.
Yeah, and I'll just say this, and I know the school may be out with you with regard to what I'm going to say, and that's fine. But there's no doubt in my mind, with regard to what we were talking about today, I'll give you a great example. Think about American life and what you see in history books, which have definitely been altered. I mean, that's been documented. Take a look at the Founding Fathers and this wonderful feeling we have toward them, okay? But to me, the story is, they give you this idea about democracy, constitutional republic, all these fine words they throw out. But really, when you put the glasses on, you understand one thing. This country, this whole world, works and lives under contract law. That's what it's about. It's in the contract. So, you get last licks if you want them.
Oh, that's it. I have to agree. I feel, we're indentured servants. I mean, that never went away, I think. They don't call it slavery anymore, because slavery's too expensive. You actually have to take care of your slave. So.
Yep. All right, John Bonanno.
Okay.
Listen, I appreciate you being with us, and this is probably not over yet, and I'll see you somewhere down the road.